Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our coffee times to talk about horror. And today I bring you book and movie recommendations. And these are all horror stories that take place at a very particular place, and that is diners, American diners.
It's coffee time.
I was watching horror movies during the month of October, and I was trying to watch at least one horror movie a day because that's what I like to do for Halloween month. And one of the movies that I watched takes place in a diner, and I thought, why not discuss horror in diners and talk about some books and some movies that take place in these establishments. So here we are today, and I'm gonna give you some book recommendation and some movie recommendations on this topic. Dining out at a restaurant, but also at a cozy diner, especially your typical American diners are supposed to be very welcoming with all of these, waitresses that are always very attentive. You're supposed to enjoy the experience and have a really good traditional meal, but sometimes those experiences turn into horror. You might also be on the wrong place at the wrong time. You might also just piss somebody off. You never know, but sometimes blood is spilled at diners. You might see an uninvited guest. Somebody might come into the diner with very, very grim purposes. Maybe somebody joins you at the table, a stranger, and asks you to sacrifice something. You never know what could happen when an uninvited guest, a stranger, walks into a diner. It might also be something that is in the coffee, in the food. It might be a virus spreading. It might be somebody walking through that door that carries a disease. You never know what's gonna happen. Some restaurants, some diners are believed to be haunted because they have seen many crimes in the years that they have been opened. So even seeing something supernatural in a restaurant or a diner, it's kind of normal. So next time that you decide to go out to eat at a restaurant or a diner, keep all of these things in mind. Oh, and also, bon appetit. Let's start with the books. We have A Monster in a Diner by Scott Donnelly. We are at the Freeway Stop Diner, and it is a place that should offer a cozy, warm place for people with nice, warm food and coffee, especially when the weather conditions outside are normally not that great and the winters are very rough. There is a very loud earth-shaking crash that can be heard outside of the diner because outside of the diner what they have is woods, and the woods, they're full of secrets. In the diner we have 8 strangers, and after they hear the noise, things are just going to get kickstarted. And the 8 strangers are kind of stranded inside of this diner because the weather conditions outside and the snowstorm don't allow them to really leave anywhere safely. And also, the 8 strangers are going to figure out very quickly that they all are hiding something. They are not who they claim to be, and somebody ends up dead. The next one is called Tinfoil Butterfly by Rachel Eve Moulton, and this is a horror thriller. This is a book about survival and companionship. Emma is hitchhiking through the United States, and she's doing it alone. She's trying to leave behind a life that she no longer wants to be a part of. However, she decides to go into someone's car because hijacking, but it can be really dangerous. And actually, this guy ends up hurting her and leaving her stranded in a small town. So she seeks refuge in the diner, which is supposed to be a safe place. However, she's going to meet someone else inside of the diner that is going to make her life and her night much, much worse. This is a scary and chilling exploration of evil. I think the cover is also kind of horrifying to have this tinfoil kind of mask over you. And yeah, this is a horror mystery thriller if that's more of your vibe, because the first one was a pure on horror. Next we have One Hell of a Night by Stephanie Sparks, another one that is pure horror. And Stephanie Sparks is somebody that I consider an underrated author. I have read all of her published works and I have enjoyed them all. This is the last one that I read by her, and honestly this was such a wild ride. We follow a government agent called Dean that is in a very small town for work. He's performing an investigation, and it is the last night. He's about to leave because he has finished his job in this town, and he decides to go on a dating app where he connects with a woman, and they decide to meet at a diner, to have a date at a diner in this small town. And yeah, things started to get really bad for them after that. They will soon learn that this town where they are stuck is a town that has its own laws and rules, and they are soon going to also realize that they might potentially never be able to leave. This story puts a very unlikely pair in the middle of the US in an isolated town, almost with their own rules and laws, and it was quite crazy. Like, the book starts fairly normal, I would say, and then it just starts to get creepier and crazier and more disturbing. The book has great tension, great body horror, and the author never disappoints. It's truly a book about survival and also the darkest corners of the human mind. Dining by Ty Schwamberger, and this is a horror novella, so this is perfect if you're looking for something short. We follow a couple of friends that are on their way to Las Vegas to go wild, go crazy, but on the way they decide to stop for a bite, and they decide to stop at a place called Mel's Diner. When they're there, they start to make fun of the people in the diner, and they end up also splitting without paying the bill. After that, the girls will be followed because obviously they've done something bad and they are probably going to be punished unless they can escape. So again, these girls are trying, I guess, to survive the night. But also, honestly, they kind of, deserve it because they were bad. So in this one, you might also be a little bit on the side of the diner's owner. Gail's All-Fried Dinner by L. Lee Martinez, and this is one that combines horror with humor and a little bit of fantasy. This is just a very fun fantasy with some horror elements to it because we do have zombies and werewolves and stuff like that. So it's more for people that are looking for a light horror read, that it's more about the fun. Duke and Earl decide to make a pit stop at a diner to grab something to eat, and when they are having their food, the owner asks them if they can help her to get rid of a problem that she has, which is basically to get rid of zombies. However, when they are trying to help the diner's owner, they will realize that this place actually is hiding much darker secrets, and the zombies might actually be the least of their problems. And Duke and Earl, you will see Duke is a werewolf and Earl is a vampire, so it's like a lot of fun and creatures and all of the spooky vibes, but keeping it light-hearted, I guess, when it comes to the horror, and there's a little bit more fantasy in this one. And many people really enjoy this, so if you love horror with humor, this might be a book that you need to try. The last one that I'm gonna recommend you, it's called The Visitor by Sergio Gomez, and this is another horror novella, but I wanted also to particularly mention this one because it takes place during Christmas. So this is going to be a great choice as well if you're looking for more Christmas books to read. On Christmas, during one of the worst snowstorms that this place has ever seen, 5 strangers are trapped inside of a diner. And as the night moves on and they see that the weather is not getting any better, the 5 strangers start to worry. But what they should be really worried about is the 6th visitor that is going to come knocking. Despite this book not being perfect, I had a lot of fun with it, and it definitely filled that craving that I had for a horror at Christmas. So if you're looking for that, I think this is going to be perfect. Now it's time to talk about some horror movies that take place at diners. And the first one that we're going to talk about is a classic. It's called Blood Diner from 1987. 2 cannibalistic brothers kill various young women to use their flesh as part of a new special dish at their rundown restaurant, while also committing blood sacrifices to awaken a dormant Egyptian goddess. The film was originally created to be kind of like a sequel to Blood Feast, but as they were doing the movie, they decided that it was going to be something of its own. Two brothers are basically brainwashed by their serial killer uncle to help him with a sacrifice, collecting flesh of victims because he wants to resurrect a goddess. It sounds like a great thing to do. And in order to complete this sacrifice, obviously they need the flesh, the body parts of different women. So when the women come into the diner, well, they don't really make it out anymore, at least not 100% complete. And yeah, it's just fun 80s cheesy goodness. The next one doesn't take place exactly at a diner. It's more of an isolated kind of cantina, like an isolated restaurant, but I had to mention this one because it is a lot of fun, and that is From Dusk Till Dawn. The Gecko brothers are on the run from the Texas police and the FBI after a crime spree throughout the Southwest. Soon, they find themselves drawn into a battle with a bloodthirsty gang of vampires. You know, this movie at the time was quite genre bending, and it had a really cool concept when it comes to vampires, and I always thought it was a lot of fun. It had good practical effects because the team behind this movie, of course, included Tom Savini, who is one of the gods of practical effects, and we owe him so much. He's also in the From Dusk Till Dawn franchise, and even though this movie is not perfect, and I could see why some people might find this one also very cheesy, I think it's a great watch, and it's also one that gives a great performance from George Clooney, which is not a typical movie you would imagine George Clooney being in, especially because in this movie he is Quentin Tarantino's brother, and they make quite an interesting team. Moving on to another movie that might not be perfect, but when it came out, I gave it a shot and it was a decent watch, and that is Legion. A group of strangers in a diner suddenly find themselves surrounded by demons. Their only hope lies in Michael. He's an archangel who wishes to protect the unborn child of the restaurant's waitress. You know, the cast and the premise is great. Like I said, the execution might have not been the best, but it is action-packed, and I think if you have never seen it, it is at least worth a watch. One of the best things about the movie are the action scenes and the way that they were shot and the way that they did them. I think they were quite effective. I think it kind of lost a lot of people when it comes to the story. I also love a good story with a group of misfits that are trapped somewhere, are trying to survive. You guys know that, so I think that's why also this one worked for me when I watched it. Even though there is a religious kind of undertone to the movie, the best part, like I said, are the fights, the action, the kills, the shooting scenes, so it's more of an action horror, I guess. And the religious horror part might have not been the best asset. The next movie that I would like to talk to you about is actually a Spanish movie called The Bar, in Spanish El Bar, and I really enjoyed this one and I never hear people talking about it, so I thought we would discuss this today. It's not a diner, American diner, but it is, I guess, the Spanish equivalent, because bars are everywhere in Spain and they are typically owned by Spanish people and everything is very traditional inside, so it's kind of like American diners where everything is very traditional. So the same thing goes for bars. A group of people in a Madrid bar are terrified when one among them dies after a gunshot is fired. Unsure of who the killer is, they start doubting each other's intentions. We are in Madrid and a group of strangers witness several gunshots and they seek refuge in a bar. They don't know who to trust, they don't know each other, and now they're trapped inside a bar. They're too scared to go outside because they don't know who's shooting, if it is a sniper, if it's somebody targeting them, why are they being targeted? So here's where the mystery comes. This movie has great cinematography, and even though this is a movie that takes place for the majority of it inside of the same space, I think they did such a good job at creating tension and creating a very engaging story and characters, and you were really intrigued to know more about these strangers and what they were potentially hiding. I think it's very entertaining, I think it's fun, and it has some humor in it. Some people have said this movie is kind of like the Spanish version of Shaun of the Dead, and I would advise you to give it a chance. You know, I have to root for my Spanish people, so give it a chance if you haven't yet. Next we have The Last Stop in Yuma County, and this is a movie that I watched at one of the fantasy film festivals, and I was surprised on how this movie was so minimalistic, but it was so good. This is proof that you don't need a huge budget to make a great movie. While awaiting the next fuel truck at a middle of nowhere Arizona rest stop, a traveling young knife salesman is thrust into a high-stakes hostage situation by the arrival of two similarly stranded bank robbers with no qualms about using cruelty or cold, hard steel to protect their blood-stained, ill-gotten fortune. This was a great thriller. You have again strangers that are trapped in this place, in this diner in the middle of nowhere, and they cannot leave unless they wait for the next fuel truck because they wanted to stop here to refuel their cars and keep going, but the truck that needed to deliver the fuel is late, so they are all stuck inside of the diner now. And when you put such different characters and you force them to interact, sometimes things go wrong. This movie is set during the 60s or 70s. It has kind of like an ambiguous time, and this is very minimalistic. The whole movie takes place at this diner, but it is just so well executed. The tension is so well achieved, and the characters are very different but so compelling, and as always they all hide secrets, and I love the acting as well. I just think this is such an underrated movie, and I hope that more people will discover it. It's also one of those movies that when you think you know where things are going, the director pulls the rug under your feet and you're like, what the hell? So I love when movies can also surprise me. And last but not least, we have the movie that actually inspired this video, which is a movie called Last Straw. A roadside diner becomes the host of a maniac killing spree, leaving a young waitress to clean up the mess. After hard-headed Nancy fires the staff at her dad's diner, she decides to cover the last shift of the night by herself. Little does she know, she's far from alone. This is a very interesting take as well on humanity and how sometimes a minor confrontation can become something almost apocalyptic. And it's also one of those movies where when you think you have things figured out, turns out you didn't. Some things might be a little bit predictable, but I thought this movie brought something a little bit more fresh and unique to the table. The acting was great, and I think it's gonna be an unexpected movie for a lot of people. I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but I think this is one that definitely you should watch if you have not seen it yet, especially if you love, again, kind of minimalistic movies, but that have a very good plot that is really well executed. And as a bonus, I wanted to mention the movie Diner in America. And I say as a bonus because this is not a horror movie, but I also watched this one in the Fantasy Film Festival a couple of years ago, and I loved it. This is made for people that are the weirdos, for people that are not understood by society, and it is a beautiful kind of almost rom-com with a bit of drama in it, and I loved it. So I just wanted to mention it here in case that you had not seen it. This is an indie film about a weird girl that ends up kind of going on an adventure with a member of a band that she's a fan of, and it's just so cool, and it is very fun. I love the comedy in this, and it's awkward at times, but definitely if you've never seen this one before and you also love to enjoy movies that are not just horror, give it a chance. So these were my horror recommendations of books and movies that take place in very interesting restaurants or diners, and I hope that you enjoyed the list. I hope that you enjoyed the idea for this video. Let me know if there's any other specific theme that you would like me to talk about and give you some book and movie recommendations for. But I hope that you enjoyed this one. Let me know down below if you know of any other books and movies that take place in diners that are really good. Let's talk about it in the comments. If you want to directly support me and the channel, please consider joining the Patreon. The link is in the description box down below. Thank you guys, as always, so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in our next coffee time. Bye!